The history of TNA Wrestling is one of the most complex of any promotion in professional wrestling history. TNA started off hot and has a fast and exciting rise in the 2000s, but as the 2010s hit and the Hogans of the world appeared, it seemed the promotion was in its dying days. Bankruptcy after bankruptcy, all while the stars who made TNA the alternative would leave the once thriving promotion. This would all change in late 2017. As after years of alienating the fans who cheered them on, the promotion would be under new management. Enter Scott D'Amore and Don Callis. With a vision in mind and a goal in sight, the two men would begin to build the newly rebranded Impact Wrestling up from the ashes. But as we say goodbye to this era and enter the return of TNA, how did it all pan out? Did the two ambitious leaders bring prestige back to the fallen company, or was the damage already done? That's what we're going to talk about in this video. My name is Kaz, welcome to the wrestling universe, and this is the roller coaster run of Impact Wrestling. While the rebrands technically started in 2017, things really started to change in 2018. 2018 started off with a complete talent change for the promotion, as top names would leave the company and be replaced by talent who would completely change the way wrestling fans viewed Impact. When it comes to losses, top names like Bobby Lashley, EC3, and the Cowboy James Storm would all leave their former home. The company would make some good signings to replace these talents, however, as names like Brian Cage, Tessa Blanchard, and Austin Aries would all come in. While what we know today shows us that some of the signings made would turn out to heavily backfire on Impact, at the time, they all brought their own levels of excitement to the promotion. Another key move by Impact during this time would be the integration of Lucha Underground's talent. Names like Sami Callihan, Taya Valkyrie, and Johnny Impact would join the promotion in its previous year, but 2018 is where Lucha Underground would leave its mark on Impact. It all started with a joint show between Lucha Underground and Impact, where the best talents of Lucha Underground would face against some of Impact's best. However, this partnership would really start to affect the promotion on one fateful night, as after the ever-controversial Alberto El Patron would be fired for no-showing several events, his world title match against Austin Aries would be changed into a triple threat against Pentagon Jr. and Rey Fenix. Pentagon would end up winning the world title, and over the course of the next year, before his switch to All Elite Wrestling, the impact he would have on, well, Impact would be monumental. Other important things to note from 2018 would be the rise of Sami Callihan. After breaking Eddie Edwards' face with a baseball bat botch, the two men would get embroiled in a feud that would link them forever. Following this, Callihan would go on to have a fantastic feud against Pentagon Jr., which led to one of the best Impact matches of the decade at Slammiversary 2018. Other wrestlers who had standout years would be the likes of Killer Kross, Austin Aries, Tessa Blanchard, and Ali. With Ali, she would get involved with the Undead Realm saga, which would be Impact's way of dipping their toes back into cinematic stories after the very successful Broken Hardy saga. Overall, it seemed Impact Wrestling was on top of the world. With great stories and matches, a fresh and exciting roster, and even rumors of them going after some of the world's top free agents like Chris Jericho, the mission statement seemed to be completed. That was until Bound for Glory 2018. BFG 2018 was the night where Austin Aries would walk out after losing his world title to Johnny Impact. While there's still questions to this day on whether this was work or shoot, there's one thing that was undeniable, that this was disastrous for Impact Wrestling. Echoes of LOL TNA would return, as their top star would suddenly disappear after a literal middle finger to the company. The company would continue to put on great shows heading into 2019, however, and things seemed to be moving forward. That was until the formation of All Elite Wrestling. 2019 is the year the professional wrestling world changed forever, as led by Tony Khan and the Elite, AEW would take the wrestling world by storm. With AEW looking for wrestlers to fill out their roster, this would turn out to be awful for Impact, as several of their top stars would leave to go to the new company as 2019 passed. Top names like the Lucha Bros, Santana and Ortiz, and Ali would all leave to go to AEW. The worst part is, usually Impact has an excellent track record of replacing talent, but with all the top free agents going to AEW, the WWE, or even Ring of Honor New Japan, who also have to fill out their rosters, Impact would have to rely on old wrestlers to replace the talents lost. On top of all this, staying with Impact would become a lot less appealing for the roster, as they would leave Pop TV and go on the much smaller Pursuit channel. Despite all the bad news this year, there was some positives to take too. Impact would start to focus on several homegrown acts such as the Rascals, Ace Austin, Jordan Grace, and the man who is synonymous with the Impact era, the walking weapon, Josh Alexander. And in all honesty, despite the severe losses in 2019, Impact still had several standout moments and feuds, from the wars between LAX and the Lucha Bros, to the debut of New Japan standout Michael Elgin, to the power couple reign of terror of Johnny Impact and Taya Valkyrie. And when talking about 2019, we of course can't forget Tessa Blanchard versus Sami Callihan. The feud between Callihan and Blanchard was one of innovation. It was Impact offering the wrestling world something you won't see in any other major wrestling promotion. While today it is seen as a major flop due to what we'll discuss soon, at the time it really seems to be an excellent feud which elevated Tessa Blanchard to the face of the company. Overall, 2019 was probably the worst year in this video for Impact. Things would look better after October, as Impact would find itself on a new station, the Anthem-owned Access TV, but with severe talent losses coming from several different promotions and a depleted free agent market making it hard to replace the talent, the promotion's lack of star power or buzz just made it go under the radar for the majority of the year. 2020 would be a much better year for Impact overall, but unfortunately, the year wouldn't start off great for the company. A day before Impact's Hard to Kill pay-per-view, Tessa Blanchard would be accused of several shocking things by fellow women's wrestlers. This would make her historic world title win at Hard to Kill one of controversy instead. The following month would be fairly smooth sailing for Impact, apart from the controversy of Tessa Blanchard as the world champion. Despite losing top star Brian Cage, the company would make very solid signings like Chris Bay and Kylie Ray. However, this year would also see a significant change to not just professional wrestling, but the world in general, as a global pandemic would hit. Impact would be one of the few promotions still actively producing content and would be a pillar of the wrestling world in one of its darkest years. The company would see several members of their roster unable to show up to the tapings, especially at the beginning, but would find innovative ways to keep them on TV. One wrestler who wouldn't be appearing at all would be their world champion Tessa Blanchard, which would lead to the reintroduction of the TNA World title by Moose. This limited roster would also lead to wrestlers getting spots they usually wouldn't have gotten, with names like Trey Miguel and Ace Austin entering the main event scene. 2020 would also see the massive speaking out movement, which would shake the wrestling world to its core, as several top wrestlers would be exposed for shameful actions. This would lead to Impact firing several wrestlers from their roster, such as top stars Tessa Blanchard and Michael Elgin. Fortunately, this wasn't of too much concern for Impact, as this would happen at the same time as the Slammiversary mass signings. With several teases of top stars happening the weeks prior, specifically of WWE releases, and signings such as Deonna Purrazzo and the Good Brothers happening before the show, Slammiversary 2020 would have more buzz than any Impact show has had for several years. The show would absolutely deliver too, with standout matches like Deonna Purrazzo vs Jordan Grace and surprises like the Motors and the Machine Guns, Eric Young, and EC3. This would feel like a new chapter in the history of Impact. While the buzz would die down as the months went on, the company would still leave it with a completely fresh roster and top names with genuine star power. Impact would also begin to heavily focus on cinematic stories during this period, such as Wrestle House, the John E. Bravo saga, and the Undead Realm. This brought quite a mixed reception from the fanbase, as some loved the innovation, whereas others saw it as too wacky. As Impact approached the end of the year, it seemed like the promotion was going to head into 2021 in a fairly uneventful position. That was until an episode of AEW Dynamite where Don Callis would cost Jon Moxley the AEW World title against Kenny Omega and proclaim that the actions we've witnessed would be explained on Impact TV. The following Impact, Kenny Omega would appear on the show, and with teases of a match against Impact World Champion Rich Swann, it seemed that 2021 was going to be quite an eventful year for Impact. As we head into the new year, Kenny Omega would continue to get involved with Impact, forming an alliance with the Good Brothers on both Impact and AEW programming. This would result in Omega's first match in Impact at Hard to Kill 2021, where he beat top stars such as Impact World Champion Rich Swann in a 6-man tag, setting up a massive world title match at Rebellion 2021, which Omega would win. The influence of AEW would not just be via Omega, as names such as Private Party, Matt Hardy, and even Tony Khan would appear in the following months. Alongside the AEW partnership, Impact would also rekindle their partnership with New Japan Pro Wrestling this year, with Finjuice being the first to cross the line. At the same time as all of this, the start of the year would also see the rise of Josh Alexander. After the departure of Ethan Page, Alexander would move to the X Division and would go on to win the X Division title soon into his run, having several show-stealing matches, with the most notable being a 65-minute match against TJP, which would make history as the longest match ever held in an Impact ring. 2021 would also see the reintroduction of the Knockout Tag titles. Being held by Fire and Flavor at first, the titles would really hit the next level when the Inspiration would join the company, with the top stars bringing importance and prestige to the newly returned titles. The Inspiration weren't the only stars to join the promotion in the first half of the year, as names like Matt Cardona, Steve Macklin, and W. Morrissey would also make their debut in the promotion around this time. As we head into Slammiversary 2021, Impact would once again tease several surprises for the show. The surprises would have nowhere near the effect as they did in 2020, but we still did get a few very notable ones, such as the debut of Switchblade Jay White and the return of Mickie James, which would lead to an excellent feud with Deonna Purrazzo. Unfortunately, around this time is also when the AEW partnership started to fall apart. Other than the addition of Chris Bay to Bullet Club, the Jay White Omega story never went anywhere in Impact, and with fans getting sick of Omega beating all of Impact's best, all while Tony Khan would regularly diss the promotion and advertisements on Impact's own TV show, things really started to fall apart when Omega would lose the world title to fellow AEW star Christian Cage, meaning after all of that he wouldn't even lose to an Impact star. Having said that, it was still a treat for Impact fans to have Christian Cage back, albeit for a limited time. His run wouldn't last too long, however, as after Josh Alexander would defeat Chris Sabin to retain the X Division Championship, Alexander would later announce he would be cashing in Option C on Christian Cage, vacating his title to challenge Cage at Impact's biggest show of the year. Alexander would end up winning the World Championship on this fateful night, celebrating his win with his wife and child in a genuinely beautiful moment. That was until Moose, the man who won the Call Your Shot gauntlet earlier in the night, would cash in and defeat an unprepared Alexander for the world title on the same night he won it. While this decision was incredibly controversial, it did lead to a genuinely great story for Alexander, chasing the world title against a man who took everything from him, which would take up the next 6 months of TV. The AEW partnership would officially end at Bound for Glory, and Impact would move forward without their elite partner. How would Impact fare heading into 2022 with this significant change? 2022 would be an interesting year for Impact. With Don Callis leaving the year prior to sign with AEW, this was Scott D'Amore's first full year leading the ship single-handedly. Despite this, it seemed the Moore still had a vision in mind, a star to revolve the year around, and that star was the walking weapon, Josh Alexander. Alexander would enter the year chasing the world title, and coming into the year with wins over the likes of Christian Cage and Minoru Suzuki, his momentum would continue to skyrocket at Hard to Kill as he would defeat former WWE star Jonah. Alexander would become more and more unhinged in his chase against Impact World Champion Moose, leading to the more kayfabe firing him. This would lead to questions of Alexander's status in the company, as it was around the same time his contract would expire in real life. But those questions would be answered as Alexander would make his return, proclaim he's resigned, and announce on behalf of management a match against Moose at Impact Rebellion pay-per-view. After half a year of struggle, Josh Alexander would finally defeat Moose at Rebellion, thus starting one of the greatest Impact World title runs of all time. Other significant news at the start of the year would be the culmination of the incredible Deonna Purrazzo vs. Mickie James feud, where Mickie would retain the Knockouts Championship. Following this, a shocking announcement would be made on Friday Night SmackDown, as Mickie James would be announced for the WWE Royal Rumble. She would appear in the match with the Knockouts Championship, with Impact mentioned several times on WWE programming. This seemed to be a one-off, however, as nothing would come out of this potential partnership after this moment. This year would be quite historic for the Knockouts, as they would have both their first Ultimate X and first Queen of the Mountain matches in promotion history. The Queen of the Mountain match would take place at Slammiversary 2022, which would be Impact's 20th year anniversary show. The company would make their anniversary a large part of their year, but Slammiversary is really where we would go all out, as names like America's Most Wanted, Nick Aldis, Frankie Kazarian, and even AJ Styles himself, albeit in a video package, would appear on the show. Other highlights of the year would include the debut of ex-Ring of Honor stars in the Honor No More stable, later revealed to be led by newly turned heel Eddie Edwards. There's also the rise of Steve Maclin to a genuine main event player, and the short yet fun run of the legendary tag team the Briscoes. Unfortunately, the year would see heavy losses for Impact at the end, as with a newly rebranded Tony Khan-owned Ring of Honor looking for talent, and Triple H taking over the WWE, several of Impact's top stars would leave the promotion. And while the product was very good for the majority of the year, by the end, Impact would see the effects of the mass exodus with a controversial Bully Ray main event push and the infamous short Bobby Fish run, showing the effect of the smaller roster. And as we close a quite mixed 2022, no one could have predicted the shocking event that would take place the following year for the once called Impact Wrestling. 2023 would start off hot, as the controversial Bully Ray vs. Josh Alexander feud would end in a quite well-received Full Metal Mayhem match, and Mickie James' superb Last Rodeo storyline would culminate with yet another Knockout title win in the main event of the show. Unfortunately, the momentum would quickly die down with very unfortunate injuries, as both world champions would get injured and be forced to vacate around the same time. New champions would be crowned at Rebellion, however, with real-life married couple Deonna Purrazzo and Steve Maclin winning the world titles respectively. For Maclin specifically, this was a huge moment, but not being able to dethrone Alexander did take away some of the momentum from the win. His run would be fairly short too, unfortunately, as he would lose it a couple months in to TNA original Alex Shelley. On the same night, Chris Sabin would also win the X Division Championship, which would lead to the Motor City domination of Impact we see to this day. In general, it seemed every division was taken care of thoroughly this year. The Knockouts division would make several excellent additions, including their blockbuster signing of Trinity, who would become their biggest star. The X division would continue to produce some of the most exciting wrestling in the world, being led by the likes of Chris Sabin, Mike Bailey, and Leo Rush. The tag division would see several teams rise up, such as the newly reunited Rascals, the Ace and Bay Connection, and Subculture. Whereas the world title scene would also see several solid additions, with names like Shelley and Macklin rising up, the usual gatekeepers of Moose and Eddie Edwards, new additions like a fully signed Frankie Kazarian, and the short yet effective Nick Aldis run. Things would enter the next gear in the build to Bound for Glory 2023, with both Josh Alexander and Mickie James returning to go after the titles they never lost. The show would also see Forbidden Door standout matches like Kenta vs Chris Sabin and Will Ospreay vs Mike Bailey. BFG had a lot of hype going into it, due to all the exciting matches, but no one could have expected what this show would entail. There would be two main talking points coming out of this show. For one, the excellent Will Ospreay vs Mike Bailey match, which would cement itself in history as one of the best matches in the company's entire catalog. And for two, the return of total, non-stop action. To me, the announcement of TNA's return is Impact getting ready to move to the next level once again. A common theme in this video is Impact playing second fiddle to the bigger companies, and while that will still happen, such as recent departures Deonna Purrazzo and the heavily rumored Trinity, it does feel like TNA is entering that second gear heading into Harticle 2024. Overall, I would describe this 6-year run from Impact as a complete roller coaster of emotions. However, even at its low point, you always wanted it to succeed. It was always the little engine that could, and it seems like as we enter 2024, the old becomes the new because there's a new face in professional wrestling, and that is total non-stop